And welcome to Arts and Entertainment. I'm Deborah Gilbert, your host. And as always, it's so great to have you. Thank you so much for being here. And again, as always, I hope you enjoy the show, where we're going to highlight the Goodspeed musicals. And I have the pleasure of having Michael Fling, the Associate Artistic Director, as my guest today. And Michael, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me, us, and doing this.
Well, as I just mentioned to you before we started taping, I like to introduce the guest to the viewer. So why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself.
I am originally from the great state of Oklahoma, where the wind does, in fact, come sweeping down the plain. And grew up in Tulsa, spent 18 years there. Love it. Still have most of my family is there. And did community theater and high school theater. Always did musicals. I've loved musicals from the time that could understood what a musical was. I was a very I had the good fortune of a mom and grandmothers who loved musicals. So I was raised on the sound of music, and I like to tell the story. My grandma, we moved in with my grandma at a certain point when my parents were getting divorced, and we were like at the age where you're like learning table manners and all the things, and like it was very much normal in our childhood for like, oh, if you need to learn table manners, let's watch My Fair Lady, because that's how you are supposed to act. So there was lots of that in my childhood. So I kind of grew up like just living and breathing musicals and loving them. And then got to high school, and I always thought I wanted to do film and to be a film director. That was always kind of what I thought. But I really just liked musicals. I wanted to do musicals. And I had, again, the good fortune to have an excellent high school theater teacher who like looked at me as a freshman in high school and was like, Michael, you don't want to do movies. You want to do theater. You don't want to remake The Sound of Music. Just want to do The Sound of Music on stage. And I was like, oh, I guess that's right. Um, so thanks, shout out to Kevin Hurst forever and for always. And then I went to school at Webster University, the Conservatory of Theater Arts. There I got a degree, my undergrad in directing. And then my junior year, I had the amazing opportunity to begin kind of co-working at the Muni, which is the oldest and largest outdoor musical theater in the country. It seats like 11,000 people. The stage is like the size of a football field, or half a football field, actually. And spent a couple years there when I was still in school as an intern, and assisting the executive producer and artistic director there and the casting director. And then I graduated school and moved to New York. And funnily enough, it was at the Muni that I met Donna Lynn Hilton, who is our artist director here at Goodspeed, because my second summer there, we did the second production of Holiday Inn, where I was the associate director. And so when Donna Lynn came to see Holiday Inn after it had been at Goodspeed, I met her. And then so began our professional relationship. And then a few years, well, now like 5 years ago, just before the world shut down, she really wanted to have a strong associate and asked if I would be interested in joining the team, and kind of recruited me in after I'd done a few shows here as an associate director, recruited me in to join staff full time. And I got here like 6 months before the world shut down and been here ever since. So it's been quite the ride, but a very, very exciting one.
And of course, this show deals with arts, entertainment, and culture, but I have a lot of theater, but a lot of actors and performers. And I always ask, did you ever think that you were going to be on stage as a performer? I know you're talking behind the scenes, but did you ever have the itch to be able to perform?
I mean, I performed when I was in high school. I haven't been on stage in a very, very, very long time. But I did all throughout my youth and school, I certainly. And I kind of thought that I would perform for a long time and then eventually make the leap to directing, because that's what I wanted to do. That was the path that I had always seen people take. And then again, I got lucky that I found Webster and got my undergrad in directing. So I just kind of, I magically skipped that step. So I guess the answer is yes. At one point I did think that I would perform, but I didn't ever really post high school.
Directing, how did you decide that you wanted to become a director?
Well, my family will tell you that it was always very clear that like I always wanted to be in charge and tell the story. And Thanksgiving coming up this week, like I would have used that as an opportunity to stage a show with my cousins and my siblings, and to do something. I always wanted to do that. So often I was starring in those things too, but it was very clear. And I don't know, something about it. I always wanted to look at the thing holistically, and to tell the story and be the one that really is responsible for that and making sure that it's as accessible for audiences as possible. I'm a really big believer in everyone having a good time at the theater, and everyone is a theater person. They may just not know it yet or haven't seen the theater that you know ma- makes them understand that they're a theater person and they can like theater. And so I really, that's kind of been my life's thing, is like I want everyone to come see a show and have a great time. And the best way I think for me to do that is by directing and producing.
And you mentioned film and you mentioned theater, and there are probably people saying, but I feel the same way that he felt. What about film made you want to pursue it, and then how did you make the transition over to theater for good?
Well, I think the real answer is like that's just what I had the most exposure to. That was what seemed to be like a career path. I didn't think, for as much as I knew theater, growing up in Tulsa, there's not a professional theater there. So there were not the examples of how to make a life professionally in theater. Sure, people did that in New York, but it felt very like it just felt distant to me, and something that it wasn't totally it just didn't feel as like I didn't have as much access to it as I did Hollywood, and film. So I kind of saw that and knew that that was possible. It really wasn't until my theater teacher stepped in, and said, "No, you don't want to do that. You want to do theater." And then it was like, "Oh yeah, like I'm not really interested in making. I mean, I liked making movies, I guess, but I didn't really." I was much more interested in the directing aspects of theater in terms of communicating with actors and designers and reinventing something in a space than I was like capturing it in this little tiny box. And So that was really, and now film is great. I do not mean to, I've done some film work now as a professional, and it is similar but different. There are obviously people who do both, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, or on stage, backstage. But yeah, so and then when he said that, and it just kind of like all fell into place, like all I'd been doing basically was theater. I just figured that that was always going to be what I did for, when I was in Tulsa, but then like I'd go to school for film and just then go do film. So it was really kind of like, oh, actually, I have a lot of the skills and a lot of the knowledge I need in order to pursue theater. I wasn't learning a new medium. Doing what I've been doing for a long time.
And you also mentioned New York. Tell us about that chapter. What took you there?
Well, I mean, it's where it's where most of the jobs are. So, I moved there after graduating college, and I spent a number of years freelancing, directing, and doing associate assistant work across the country. And it was a great time. It was a bananas time. I did the whole sublet, and didn't really have. I had an apartment for the first year I was there, and worked in a producing office of one of my mentors. And it was right after they won the Tony for Fun Home for Best Musical, which I had a little bit helped with that campaign and was a little bit in Fun Home world. And so I spent the first year in New York, in tangentially the family and the producing family of the Tony Award winner for Best Musical. So that opened a ton of doors for me. I met so many people and got to be in so many rooms where I learned so much about the producing element of theater, and the marketing and certainly like the admin of the day to day of theater life. And all the while directing and doing the small little festivals and doing this little development here and working on this script there, and then popping out to St. Louis to do a show, popping up to Connecticut to do a show, all that sort of thing. So that like 5 year portion of my life, probably, I was I likened it a lot to, I'm a big Mary Poppins person. I love Mary Poppins. And I was like, being a freelancer is a lot like being Mary Poppins. Like you fly in, you land, you do some things, hopefully everyone's happy, and then you leave. And that was a lot of my life for those 5 years.
again with New York. Do you recommend that to people that are in the industry to go into New York and experience that and work before you go elsewhere?
I mean, I think it's every person's journey is going to be a little bit different, and depending on what you want to do in theater, yeah, I mean that is where the largest amount of job opportunities exist there. So I don't know that I recommend doing it in terms of like everyone's going to have their different path. What I will say is if the person who's about to graduate college with their BFA in musical theater or their BA in theater or whatever that may be, there is no time to move to New York like when you're 22. It only gets harder to move to New York because you start to live adult life and you have things and you get used to people and you get into a routine, and it gets harder and harder to move to New York. And I do think that there is a lot to be gained from having that experience in New York. But that said, there are plenty of people who make a life in the arts and a career in the arts outside of New York, and we tend not to talk about those people. They tend to be like local favorites and really talented, but they don't get the same kind of profile that New York people do. And I don't necessarily love that. So there is no one size fits all.
Okay, Michael, let's take a break. I'm Deborah Gilbert. You are tuned into Arts and Entertainment. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. So if you want to talk to your kids, you have to get it trending.
No, you're doing it wrong.
Let's go.
Can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
The holiday season is here, and so are scammers. Ready to trick unsuspecting shoppers with fake ads and too good to be true offers. Scammers are offering fake and deceptive beauty products, targeting viral trends, and pretending to sell gifts for loved ones. So look out for red flags like huge discounts, unfamiliar retailers, and requests for payment through payment apps. Better Business Bureau can help you protect yourself from online scams this holiday season. Learn more at bbb.org/scam studies.
And welcome back to Arts and Entertainment. I'm Deborah Gilbert, your host. And again, as always, thanks so much for being here. My conversation continues on with Michael Fling. Okay, Michael, the Goodspeed musicals is really one of the reasons why you're here, although you're delightful, and I'm so glad that you're here just to share your story. But why don't you tell us what the Goodspeed musicals is all about and your position as the Associate Artistic Director?
So yeah, we are a musical theater producing organization. We produce shows, specifically for Connecticut. People often don't quite understand the difference between community theater, a Broadway national tour, and a professional theater and what those things are. And I like to say that community theater is like a cookout with my dad in the backyard. It is great. I love it. My dad makes a good burger, and it's about spending time with family and friends and all that. And then a Broadway national tour is like going to McDonald's, and I love McDonald's. I'm a sucker for McDonald's. But like you're gonna get the same thing every time, regardless of where you go. That's what it's gonna be. And I like to say that like the regional theater and local professional theaters are like going to the best burger joint down the street. Like that's the best burger in town because it's made specifically for you with locally sourced meat and all the sorts of things. And that's exactly what we do here. So we're producing theater specifically for Connecticut and for Connecticut audiences. And with the focus on musical theater, we have a long 60-year history of producing big musicals in a small space. If you've ever been to the Goodspeed, it's a very small stage. But we do classic musicals and revivals of those classic musicals, and we have quite a history of developing new work as well. Famously, of course, we premiered Annie before it became Annie back in 1976 for us, but 77 on Broadway, as well as Man of La Mancha and Shenandoah and Holiday Inn, and a great number of other shows. All Shook Up that we're doing next year, actually. We premiered at our secondary space in Chester, the Terrace Theater, which is pretty much devoted to new work development. So yeah, we produce musicals. We love musicals. We're all about delighting and entertaining and inspiring and occasionally challenging audiences and having and sparking good conversation about our world and the people in it and how we can be better to one another.
Now, you mentioned Donna Lynn Hilton, who is very famous from the Goodspeed and your relationship with her. What is it that drew you to go to the Goodspeed out of all places in East Haddam, Connecticut? What brought you here?
Well, the Goodspeed, it really is a special organization. I mean, I mentioned the history of the organization, but there is also such a love of the Goodspeed that comes from the community that is really unique and special. There's something about like walking in and the kind of picturesque view of the river and the bridge and the opera house and walking up those big red stairs. There's such a unique experience to coming to Goodspeed that like the first time I ever did a show here, I was like, I love it here. This is just wonderful. And when we opened the first show that I did here, I was the opening of a season, and there was a couple sitting right by me and the director, and they were just like chatting amongst themselves, looking at the program about like what the future, what the next shows were, and they just went, the woman said to her presumably husband, like, I just love Goodspeed. And I was like, you know what? I do too. It just feels like a place that I want to be. So when she was like, hey, I would really like to have you be my partner in crime here and help, take Goodspeed into the future, I jumped at the opportunity. It's not often that an organization with the history and reputation and prestige that Goodspeed does comes and asks you to join the team. So it was a pretty undeniable opportunity. And I've fallen in love with Connecticut. I mean, I've like I said, I'm from Oklahoma, but I grew up watching Gilmore Girls, and like I didn't realize it until I moved here, but I was like, oh, maybe actually all my life I've just wanted to live in Stars Hollow. Like that's actually what I wanted to do in that small town. I live right in Chester, so like I tell everyone, I'm like, that's great. I love it's fantastic here. Like everything about Connecticut is so charming and wonderful, and I'm having a great time. I love it.
Well, it sounds wonderful. Welcome to the state, even though you've been here a few years. I'm thrilled that you're happy.
It's that weird thing, like I got here 6 months before the world shut down. So like I still feel like I'm new to Connecticut, even though I've been here for 5 years. I'm like, well, like 1.5, 2 of those years like didn't really count. Like so I feel like I'm still getting to know it and absolutely love every bit of it.
Okay, Associate Artistic Director is your title. Why don't you inform the audience as to what does that really mean? What are your responsibilities?
So kind of like I mentioned earlier, so I am in charge of all of our new work development and all that. So all the way from commissioning a new show to which we do a couple times every few years. And then we have a writer's residency program that we want to run in the winter called The Grove, that we partner with the Johnny Mercer Foundation, where we bring up like 30 writers and we give them a house and a piano and a printer, and they're able to just write and develop their whatever musical they're working on, which is a really special time. So I oversee that. I oversee our Festival of New Musicals, which happens in January. We do 3 presentations of new musicals and 2 cabarets, along with a series of seminars about the industry and all things theater and musicals. And then, so that's like our new work pipeline, as it were. And then we do 4 shows at the Opera House a year, and 3 shows at the Terrace, our secondary space in Chester. And I'm responsible for overseeing the day-to-day, producing of those shows, making sure they get to stage as efficiently, smoothly, and positively as possible. Be that a new work that is actively, getting page changes and new songs and new scenes, all the way to a standard revival that we're breathing new life into and trying to honor the history and the text that's on the page that's so beloved. So that's, and on top of all the things that it takes to run a theater, so marketing, fundraising, and general production things, there are a ton of things that flow into the job of Associate Artistic Director.
You must have a team that works with you. It sounds as if you have a tremendous amount that you do. Do you find that the people at the Goodspeed are all feeling the same way that you feel about the establishment itself?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard to be here and not feel the I'm going to say pressure, but in a good way, of like living up to a reputation both nationally but also locally. We have audience members who have been, loyal audience members for 30 plus years, who have such tremendous love and care for what we do here. So it is quite an infectious it's an infectious spirit to be around, and it takes an army to produce a musical. Musicals they're big, just by definition. Adding music to everything makes it's big, and there's dancing and props and scenery and all the things that would typically come with a play. Plus, you add everything musical. So it takes a whole lot of people, and we have a really, really great team that. Really, I'm always impressed by the artistry and craftsmanship that our production staff and the designers we hire, and even our our administrative staff who go above and beyond to make sure that everyone's taken care of, from our members who are so great and give us a little additional gift on top of their season subscription, all the way to our box office and our front of house management. Like, there is a lot of care for both Goodspeed as an institution, but also our audience, because we're ultimately nothing without our audience. The Goodspeed audience is what makes Goodspeed Goodspeed.
And what I don't want to forget, so that the audience has a place to go, is the website, Goodspeed.org. Do you know what the viewer will find when they go to the website?
You'll find all kinds of information about all the programs we do, all of our shows. We have a really exciting 2025 season coming up with the Goodspeed premiere of Ragtime, which is one of the most beloved musicals of the last 25 years. And just a phenomenal, phenomenal piece that speaks to our times in such a powerful way. All the way to All Shook Up, which is our second show of the season, and something that we premiered at the Terrace before it was on Broadway, back in 2004 for us, but 2005 for Broadway. And we're doing a special 20th anniversary production at the Goodspeed, which should be really fun. I actually did that show in high school. One of the last times I was on stage was on All Shook Up, and that video, thankfully, does not exist on the internet. And then we're doing a 50th anniversary production of Chorus Line, which we've never done at Goodspeed. Obviously, one of the great classic musicals, and we're thrilled to be restaging the original Michael Bennett choreography under the eye of Parker Essie as the choreographer, and Rob Ruggiero of TheaterWorks Hartford, who's also a dear friend and collaborator, and the two of them are just going to be absolute dynamite on the show, and we're thrilled to be bringing it. And then a world premiere of Jerry Herman's Mrs. Santa Claus, which is the last Jerry Herman score that he ever wrote, that he wrote for Angela Lansbury for television in the 90s. It's never been brought to stage, and we're thrilled to be premiering it with a really exciting adaptation by Alexis Shear, the young author who's written the book. And that's all to say. I can't talk about the Terrace yet, but we've got 3 really exciting projects happening at the Terrace as well. So you'll find information about that, about how to become a member, and the restaurants to go to when you're down here, in case you haven't ever been here. East Haddam and Chester have such phenomenal food and things. So all the way to all sorts of things at the website, goodspeed.org.
And you know what? And as I've mentioned before, we have a lot of we have a lot of artists that would like to be able to perform at the Goodspeed, in front of and backstage. How does somebody present themselves to you, audition-wise? What do they do?
Yeah, so we have a local call, and we actually just wrapped it up a couple weekends ago, where we see local talent. If you are an actor that wants to be on stage at the Goodspeed, that's the easiest and best road for you to be seen by us, because then you're sorted into the local group of people. And as we try to hire more and more local artists, like, that's a really, really valuable step in our casting journey. And then we cast, shows individually mainly out of New York. We that's where our hub is. So you can always, try to get into New York and be seen there. But they're also, the Connecticut flagship presenting theaters. I guess I'm maybe breaking news by saying this, but we're looking at having a networking event in January, where all kinds of local Connecticut artists, be you actor, designer, technician, in whatever capacity that you exist, could come and meet all of us, because we all need to have a thriving art scene, and get to know our local artists and artisans. So be on the lookout for that. There should be information on everyone's social media pages and websites about that. But those are two great ways. And a cold email to a website to the email that's listed on the website is also never a bad thing. My email gets flooded sometimes with things, but any and all of those roads are a great way to get to know us.
Okay, we are starting to run out of time. Any closing thoughts for the viewer?
Just thank you for having me, and I hope that if you've never been to Goodspeed before, I hope that we're on your list of places to go in Connecticut, where you can have a great night out with friends or a loved one or a date or whatever it may be. Come out and see a show and see live theater and see a great musical, and I guarantee you will not be disappointed by the quality that you see on the Goodspeed stage.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure and so informative, and I want to thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you, Deborah, for having me. It's really, really a treat.
Okay, I'm Deborah Gilbert. You've been tuned in to Arts and Entertainment. In case you need to reach me, I'm at artsandentertainment@mail.com. Well, I hope you have a super day today. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.